Here's something else that happened today. The president of your country talking to the leader of Russia about that country meddling in our elections. Take a look.
President, will you tell Russia not to meddle with the
Don't meddle in the election. But this leads to another dynamic on display. Donald Trump has long said everything regarding this Russian meddling is basically fake news. But today, he shares this joke with Putin about their dislike of the press. Watch this moment that's caught on camera by Russian state media. This was before the United States pool cameras were even rolling.
He's so tall.
Little camaraderie there. Reuters reporting that moments before the exchange, Trump joked with Putin about journalists and said, quote, "You could get rid of them." Now, let's be clear. The president may say he's bonding or joking, but for Putin, this is no joke. 26 journalists mysteriously killed since Putin took office in 1999. So what are Americans to make of this? What does this mean? Julia Ioffe is a Russia expert. You may have seen her on our air. She's a correspondent with GQ. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I want to ask you all about this. It seems pretty unusual, to say the least, for a president to be joking with a leader who's credibly accused of this kind of mistreatment. So will you stay with me and we'll have the combo in 30 seconds?
Sure.
Okay. We'll be back in 30. And I'm back with Julia Ioffe discussing the president joking around about getting rid of journalists. Julia, when you look at that moment, does it matter?
Oh, absolutely. And it matters because it's not, it's not a one-off. And I can't say it's a joke for our president. He's talked about the press, constantly talked about the American press being the enemies of the people. He incites his fans and supporters to boo the press at his rallies. He has stood by Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, despite his obvious connection to the murder of Saudi journalist and oppositionist Jamal Khashoggi. And I think, he has said this, for example, about Kim Jong-un of North Korea, that, when he speaks, his people sit up and listen. I think he and his ambassador said about Viktor Orban of Hungary that Donald Trump would like to see an environment like this in the U.S. where the states weren't fake news, i.e. anything remotely unfavorable about writing or covering anything remotely unfavorable about Donald Trump, but, just giving him the kind of glowing coverage that Kim Jong-un gets, that Vladimir Putin gets, that MBS gets at home. So I think he's expressing a desire there, and he knows he's speaking to a guy who has accomplished this goal very brutally.
Exactly. You mentioned the Saudis. Madeleine Albright, of course, former Secretary of State, spoke out about that very point today. Take a look.
I also think it's absolutely essential for the President of the United States to make clear to the leaders of Saudi Arabia that they cannot obviously go murdering people, but also just generally on human rights. And I don't understand, again, how President Trump finds more solace in meeting with authoritarian leaders and making fun of and insulting our friends.
Given your work looking at other countries and foreign policies, walk us through what is the tension here? Because on the one hand, Donald Trump is less hawkish than many leaders in both parties. Certainly ran on that. Certainly, so far, less military interventionist than, say, the Bush administration. And yet, on the flip side, there is this incredibly cold support for human rights abuse and murderous regimes.
Right. Although I would say that, his administration has certainly really ramped up tensions with Iran, sending more troops to the region. But, let's leave that aside for a second. I think he just has an affinity for these strong men. I mean, and Putin is also a special case because at this point he knows he's been briefed on the intelligence. Now we've all been briefed on the intelligence. He knows that Vladimir Putin helped him win the election, that Vladimir Putin has been gunning for him and more. So, of course, he's his fan. But even without that, I think he has shown an affinity for and a kind of camaraderie and understanding of people like Duterte in the Philippines, Erdogan of Turkey, Orban of Hungary, Xi Jinping of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, these guys who rule with an iron fist, who never get criticized, which our president also has a hard time with. who just, you know, their wish, these leaders' wishes are their underlings' commands and their country's commands, and there's no pesky Congress to get in the way and no court to get in the way. You know, and these people also run their countries like a family business, and I think they're kind of the people he wants to be. They're kind of aspirational friends, I would say.
Aspirational friends, and as you say, he's showing us quite blatantly, publicly, it's not a secret, that there is a thirst for, as you put it, the sort of family business graft and the authoritarian impulses of these other places. People can make of that what they will.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.